Hello. We are now starting our live weekly demo here at Pipedream. And we're going to quickly cover how to build a workflow from start to finish using the iterative process of generating a test event, testing the code, and deploying the workflow. We're still waiting on a few others to join, but I'm going to go ahead and get started because we said the event starts at 2 o'clock, and I'll repeat things if we need to. But I want to save some time at the end for questions, just general questions about Pipedream. During the demo, if you have any questions about what's going on or why I'm doing certain things, please don't hesitate to raise your hand in the reactions area. It's at the bottom lower panel in Zoom. You just click reactions and raise your hand. It'll alert me and I can unmute you. We'll go ahead and get started with the flow. So we're going to start this workflow off with a little bit of introduction into what we're going to do here. So, excuse me. We have a loop with Zoom. So if you've ever worked with Stripe before, you know that there are webhooks that will connect Stripe to your API or service, so that way you can react to certain things like a checkout completed event, for example. That's what we're going to use in this case. We're going to use the Stripe webhooks to trigger a Pipedream workflow that will alert us in Slack, so that way we get a nice boost of confidence, a nice little notification that we're making some kind of sales on our app or e-commerce site, what have you. So under Stripe, we'll go into the developers area up on the top right-hand side. And here you can see there's a webhooks section. Now, typically you have to go through the hassle of setting up an ngrok tunnel or some kind of deployed service in order for a webhook to find your API. But here it's really simple with Pipedream because we can create API endpoints on the fly. So here we're creating a brand new Stripe webhook, and within our Pipedream workflow, within our Pipedream dashboard, we're going to create a workflow that responds to HTTP requests. So I've created a brand new workflow here. I'm going to rename it Stripe New Transactions. And that's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to listen to new transactions, and we're going to build off of that event. So let's get started by clicking the HTTP webhook trigger, and then we will click the requests right here. This is the default HTTP trigger configuration. We're just going to accept the full HTTP request that's incoming, and then we're going to return the response 200 OK. Great. So that alone created a URL that we can use in our apps that's unique to this specific workflow that will trigger this workflow. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it into the endpoint URL that Stripe is expecting to send the webhooks to. So I'm just going to call this Pipedream workflow under the description. And in Stripe specifically, you can select specific events that you want to listen to, because Stripe does a lot of things. In this case, we're just going to do a simple checkout event. The one in particular that I want to demo is this checkout session completed. This is a way to listen to whenever someone completes a checkout within a Stripe, customer portal. It's really simple to get started. So now we have our URL, we have our description, and we have a specific one event that we're listening to, checkout session completed, and we'll create this endpoint. And that's it from the Stripe point of view. Now, in Pipedream, we haven't seen anything yet. We're waiting for events, as it says right here in the HTTP trigger. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually create a brand new payment so we can trigger this. So we'll create a brand new payment with the payment link here. I got a sample product called Marble Run because my son is very into this at the moment. He loves playing with these. And we can set an email address for this quick fake checkout. And for those who don't know, for Stripe, you can use 424242 for a test credit card and enter in any date in the future and any number for a security code for it to work properly. So we're just mocking a transaction on your live site. And after the person clicks pay, this is a preview, I'm sorry. There we go. So it should have created a transaction here. It was a preview link after all, sorry. That's what I get for talking ahead of myself. So we'll say pierce@pipedream.com, and we'll do 4242, like I mentioned, which is a test credit card in Stripe. Now you might be able to find other sites that do this. That's an unethical life tip, but I digress. I'm just kidding. Don't do this on a live site. It won't work. So click pay here, and then you'll see that our payment was processed by Stripe. Perfect. We just simulated a full checkout flow with a customer. And back in Pipedream, we see that there's a brand new event for this workflow to process with. So the Stripe webhook was triggered when we finished our checkout. And then you can select an event here. This is the event that was sent to us from that webhook, the HTTP request specifically. And we can select this event and see all of the data that's available within the webhook. And you can see there's a large amount of data that Stripe sends. In particular, it tells us the type of event, the checkout session completed, the one we subscribe to. And we can also see lots of data regarding the customer text. There's customer details. Here we go. So here we can see the name and email address I used for the transaction. And we can go ahead and we can create an automation off of this information. So I'm going to continue down the flow and add another step to my workflow. A workflow can compose of many steps. You're not charged per step. And this workflow will spin up on demand for these events that are coming in. And for this demo, I'm going to send a Slack message to my workspace. And among the many options you have, one in particular that's pretty common is to send it to a public channel. This is really useful if you have like a new customers channel or a new transaction channel, new subscribers. It's really nice to see a log of events coming in and knowing that people are finding your checkout and can use it properly. So we'll click this to use this particular step. And as you can see, it's already filled out with fields that you can use. And these actions, if you didn't already know, are also available on our GitHub repo. You can just see them. So I'll show that to you later, but let's finish the demo. We'll connect our Slack account here. We'll pick Pipedream users. This will connect to the Pipedream user Slack workspace. And then we can easily select a channel where we want to pipe these transactions to. And I'll just call it, use the Pierce's Playground. This is my Playground Slack channel in our public Slack. And you can notice, you've kind of noticed that there's these drop downs when you click on fields. This allows you to easily kind of sort through data from other steps and select them. So now we can just use this handy search to look up the email of the user. And it searched through this whole tree and found that here's the customer's email. And I want to add also the price, right? So what's the total price of the order that was just made? Maybe it's called amount in this API. There we go. So here's the amount total. It may look funny because it's Stripe. Stripe puts the total amount of all orders in terms of whole numbers. So they times it by 100 to include cents, for example, if you're dealing with USD. Let's add some more text to this to make it a little easier. New order. We can add new lines like this. And it says that the email address, the amount, and we can also say the person's name, right? So we'll look up their name. They probably use like a first name field or a last name field. Look at that. That has the person's name. Great. So new order, name, email, and total. You can even use optional fields like changing the bot username, changing the icon, etc. But we'll just keep it really simple for this demo. And you could see that there's a test button. This is really, really nice because it allows you to test the exact data that was given by Stripe in real time using an actual Slack API call without you having to set up the OAuth token, refreshing the OAuth token. You notice that the whole handshake was done for us when I connected my Pipedream Slack account. Very simple. So now we can test, and it will actually perform this action using that data that's available in the workflow right now. So we got a test success. So if we head on over to Slack, hopefully we will see the message in our Slack playground. So I'm opening up our Slack here. And if you look here at the very bottom, most recent message, you could see, sure enough, new order, my name, I forgot a new line character. And then the order amount is $1,000, or sorry, not $1,000. See, I'm already screwed up by Stripe's formatting. It's $100. 100 divided by, just move these 2 zeros over, it's $100. Okay, so we spotted our first bug. This is actually really nice because now we can demonstrate how easy it is within Pipedream to address bugs. So you noticed I had a new line character in front of new order and a new line character in front of the email address. But what I screwed up was I forgot to add a new line character in front of the name. So it's as simple as that. I just change the input data, and then I can retest right here. And it's still in a test environment. It's not going to listen to new webhooks. It's only going to be using this event that we select in the very beginning. And we can go back to our Slack workspace, and we can see a brand new message was added with the correct new lines that's separating the fields. Awesome. So we can keep iterating on this process to change the way our workflow should behave without having to deploy it. Because once the workflow is deployed, it's going to react to any webhooks with this exact series of steps. The first thing I noticed is that the amount is kind of hard to read, right? So let's go in here. Let's make a new step in between. You can add a new step in between steps anytime or after anytime. You can move them around as well. And here, our goal is to convert that amount. That's kind of a funny number. This it looks like $10,000, but in fact, it should be just 100. We should use some node code to do the division, right? So let's make some custom node code. And you can see the scaffolding that's generated, as well as the name of the step is just node. Here, I'm going to actually perform the calculation to change the amount. And what we could do is we could do this by hand. We can find our amount again from the data up here. It should be under the payment. Let's see, invoice creation. It's a lot of data to go through, apologize. There should be amount, here we go, amount total. Now you see up here when I was hovering over the data from the event, you can see there's 2 options to copy the path or copy the value. If I copy the value, it's just going to show me, the straight value, just the odd $10,000, and it won't change from webhook to webhook. We want to capture this from the path. This is the path to the specific variable. So we copy the path and we paste it down here. And we can see it's steps.trigger because our trigger is the first step in the workflow. The event data, which is the HTTP request, the body from that HTTP request, the data, and then under Stripe, there's an object, and finally the amount total. Anything you return in Python or Node.js will export the data outside of this step, and we'll be able to use it. So I'm going to click test to show you what I mean. So we click test, and we can see under the results here, once it's done computing, it returns the value as is. We can now reuse the same paradigm where you can copy path and then bring it down here to our Slack message and change it. So now it's steps.node.return value references this steps return value. Cool. So we're getting a little bit closer. Let's divide this by 100 because that's what they're doing. They're taking the amount and times it by 100. So let's reverse it. And you notice that as soon as I made a change, it says warning, likely out of date. So this code editor is smart enough to tell us that, hey, most likely the code in here has changed from the last time you ran it. So this is out of date. And luckily for us, we can just click test, and this will retest this step in isolation. That's one of the really, really nice things about Pipedream is that you can not only choose the events in isolation, but you can test individual steps within your workflow within isolation without having to write another spec or spin up another test file, et cetera. So we can see here, we got the proper amount. Awesome. It's 100. But one thing that I kind of wish that it showed was the cents value. We're just missing the cents value altogether. So let's go ahead and we can do this by hand. We can do a math.round, but I don't remember the math functions for JavaScript off the top of my head. So I'm going to use this edit with AI tool to actually change the, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have access to that. I wish I could show it to you, but my account does not have this. So I'm sorry. We'll have to, this is a good example in your free trial, but you can edit with AI, and then you can prompt AI to inject and make the changes here. But anyway, let's continue through. I'll show you how to use this data. So now we've done the updated test. We have the updated step export from this test, and we can continue through the flow and test again down here. And we should be able to see that the Slack message is updated to 100 instead of 10,000, which is a lot easier to read. Other things we can improve are maybe adding, like the money value, the currency icon, currency symbol, and that will add in real time the currency symbol. Cool. Once we're ready with our changes, then we can click deploy at the top right or at the very bottom of the last step in your workflow, and that will deploy the workflow to your deploy this change to your workflow. So we'll click deploy. Sometimes that can take a second, but we can see we've automatically created it here. Awesome. So the next step here is to then actually trigger a live event. So you can see here, this is our deployed workflow. It shows the code that we've written. It shows the pre-built action that we've written. We need to now take a look at, well, this is waiting for live events to come in from Stripe. What we were testing was in test mode. It won't show any events here until we hit production. So let's try this again. We'll make another checkout flow, make another checkout link. Surprised it's kind of this difficult with Stripe. Here we go. So this is the same checkout link as before. We'll go through again. We'll make a new email address. And we'll use a test credit card in the future. And we'll pay. Now, this time, instead of us having to click tests on every single one of the steps in our workflow builder, it will happen automatically. And you can see how fast that happened. This is the live event that just happened at 2:17 my time, which was less than a second from when I clicked start the checkout. And back in our Pipedream Slack channel, you could see that the new order was received immediately. And we can see the amount that we finally edited to, the final format that we decided on right here in Slack. The really, really nice thing about this view here from your deployed workflow is you can see by clicking on any individual event, the results of each of the step exports. So it gives us the exact HTTP request that was given to us from Stripe for this particular event. So we can double check our code, make sure that there's not any missing data or any kind of invalid format we weren't expecting. And we can see the exports from each one of our steps. And then finally, the Slack response from this API request to Slack. So that's really, really handy. We also have the ability to see the past deployments. So if someone makes a change on your team, you can also see the deployments that they made or the last deployment made. If there's a change you don't recognize, you can look through and compare older versions of the workflow. And there's also other controls like memory, timeout, etc. So that covers the basics of building with Pipedream from start to finish using a HTTP webhook to trigger a workflow, then to use code to modify the data slightly, and then also to send a message to a Slack channel. This covers the most basic use case of Pipedream, connecting APIs together, doing some manipulation, and then sending it somewhere else. Not only can you use it for Slack, for example, but you can connect to any of the 1,000+ apps that we integrate with, or just use any HTTP request at all and send a post request to your own APIs, integrate with your own database, etc. So the possibilities are really endless. What you can do with this tool. It's a lot more flexible than others because we have the ability to dive into code at any time and even import packages from anywhere. So when I import Axios, you can do so right within code without having to worry about managing a package.json or upgrading to the latest versions of packages. It's all managed for you. So that was about 20 minutes, hit on the dot. If you have any questions, I'm happy to open the floor to answer questions from the audience. Is there anything in particular that I can assist with, or issues that you're having with Pipedream, or questions about Pipedream that have been on your mind? I'm going to unmute the channel here. There you go. Okay. All right. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions. Doesn't sound like there's much questions, but pending that, I do want to tell you about a new change coming up to Pipedream. We're going to be releasing a new feature that allows you to use Git to synchronize your workflows back to GitHub. I'll just give you a short, just visual example here. I'm going to actually switch my account and show you the new Git integration. This is really, really neat. So what's going to happen is we're going to have the ability to have projects, and you can then separate your workflows into folders finally. So that way you can actually manage the structure of your project and organize workflows into folders. So it's easier to remember where they are and find them for later. But the Git part is really interesting in that we can actually configure an entire project, not just one workflow, but an entire collection of workflows and folders into one project. And that way you can keep it within GitHub with version control. This also opens up the door to synchronizing the other way around. So if you prefer to edit locally within your own IDE and you'd like to edit your workflows that way, you can do so and then just push to GitHub, which will then sync with the Pipedream infrastructure on our side. And that makes your workflows editable locally, but deployable from GitHub with like a built-in CI/CD pipeline, so to speak. So this is coming out very soon. We're hoping to release this within the week. We'll see if this happens, but it might be two separate deploys. It might be projects first and then synchronizing Git. That's to be announced. But this will be a really, really great way to organize your workflows as well as control them in a familiar Git repository. Are there any questions about that?
I've actually already got that on mine as like beta, and it's really, really useful. So I do like that. But I wondered if I could ask a cheeky question.
Sure.
As we're looking at your screen. The other beta option you've got there, components, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so this should be available to you now, hopefully. I don't believe I have a feature flag on for this. So what you can do...
No, I've not got that.
No? I'll ask the team why that's not available. This is just an easy way to keep track of your privately published actions. Do you use that currently?
I don't currently, but it is something that I wanted to do. I think, using the Pipedream University and stuff, I've gone through some stuff, and there's certainly some ideas of some actions that I want to build out myself. So it'll be useful.
Sure. And just a quick kind of short thing to show you here. So let's go back to our example. I don't know, take something times 100. Doesn't really matter. Let's just return 100 actually. You can do this within the workflow editor. You don't need to install the CLI. You just need to include key. So it has to be a unique key. So you would call it your name, or like your workspace name. I'm just going to call it 100. A version, something similar. The type, it can be, has to be an action for this case, because you can't run sources in the builder. And then I'm trying to remember the last thing, the name. So 100. this would be the human readable name. And you just test this. And after you test it once, it should be eligible to be published. So then you just go to this dropdown and you can publish to your actions right from the builder without having to go through that song and dance of configuring the CLI and remembering which profile to which workspace account you're using. And then I'll just save it. Then in other workflows, you can just go to my actions and reuse it. So it's available right here.
Oh, perfect. Okay, yeah. I'll have a play with that. And
then under components, you could see it again here. The one thing that it's kind of, I can see why they didn't publish it to everyone. It's like not generally available yet. It's just because there's not much you can do it. You can't edit the code from here. You can only unpublish from this view. So that's probably the main reason why it's not been released. But I'll follow up the team. I'll find out. That's a good question.
It may be because I haven't published my own that's why it's not showing in the menu. I don't know. So I'll have a go.
Yeah. I don't know if sources apply here. I can switch back to my university account and see. One other thing I want to show you with that might be useful. You can take any pre-existing code you already have and just run it through the AI, and it will generate component.
Okay.
Version name and what was the last one again? Key version name and type of action that takes a number and divides it by it and rounds it to 2 decimal points. This would be a great component for working with Stripe because they multiply everything by 100. So if you want just a quick component that will round things.
Yeah, I've got a few actions from 0, and I think that does the same thing.
So yeah, you can, I mean, this is a really contrived example, but you could do the same concept, taking an already existing Node.js action and then just telling the AI to turn into a publishable component, and it will do that. So now you can just run it and then, publish it to your account to be reused.
Publish it, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But that's it on that side. You mentioned something else. It's escaping me.
Oh, did I? I might have done. That's probably escaping me as well now, to be fair.
Yeah.
I have got one other question, if I may, while we're on, which is unrelated to that. So I've got quite a few workflows on my account now where I'm working with various APIs. One of them is a ClickUp workflow that I've got where I'm using the webhook from ClickUp, but I'm using it within more than one action. So certain actions will push through certain values. So sometimes when an action comes through, it may not have, like, for example, if we take that Stripe one that you did, if you could complete a Stripe transaction without putting your name in, when it actually pushes, when the webhook pushes it to Pipedream, that name element that you had may not exist. So it would remove it completely. What's the best way of dealing with it that when, you know, further actions in your, or further steps in your workflow are potentially pulling in that value and that value doesn't exist, it then tends to error?
Is the error happening at the trigger or later on when you're using the data?
Later typically on? Later on. It's not the trigger. The trigger comes through, so the data's there, but I've maybe got 6 or 7 steps. And then what will happen is, what I tried to do is, because I wanted to make it universal for, basically, it, without getting into too much detail, it handles new projects where it will then assign it an ID, and then it'll have existing projects. So when it tries to come through, it's got to determine whether it's got an ID or not. So I've got to, obviously with the code that I've ended up having to use a bit of Python to try and chain out to say, you know, does this value exist? If it doesn't, set it as null. And I'm assuming that may be the best way of dealing with it. I don't know, but.
Yeah, exactly. Like you could set a default. We don't have props for Python yet, unfortunately, or this private publishing, this private publishing concept is not available either. But in your case, exactly what I would do is exactly what you're talking about. If he not in object, then just maybe even set it to something else, or just safely access it.
Okay.
Like like an object.get, you can go by key, or you can put a default value. I would just reuse that a lot and just rely on the very top of my Python step. Just use the value that way. So that way I always have a default backup for it. And then you could do conditionally going further, if not value. My Python's a little rusty, so it might not be exactly right. If not value.
Yeah, I think from my Python, when I first started using Pipedream, my Python is relatively good. My Node sort of JavaScript was practically non-existent, so I'm getting there slowly. But it seems, I mean, I think I've ended up using Node.js, and I've, to be fair, used the PyBot quite a bit to try and get answers to a lot of questions, which has been really useful.
Yeah. Python is still technically in beta, but it's just a continuous change, like a continuous iterative changes to it. Right now, the biggest problem used to be that the PyPy packages would fail to install. We've mostly fixed that. There are exceptions like Puppeteer still doesn't work, and there's a few others that include binaries that don't work well with the execution environment. But private actions is a big one that big rock that we would like to include. And that would help a lot with your code reuse in particular.
Yeah, because that's the thing I was finding, because I want to do it in one, I was doing it in there, and that's why I was keen on the components or the publishing actions, because I can try and combine stuff into things that I can reuse rather than having to do it from scratch on each one.
Well, one that's kind of funny, or like one workaround that I've seen before, is that folks are publishing their own private action, like private yet public PyPy packages just for their Pipedream workflows. So they can import their PyPy package of their functions, like a private action, so to speak, or private functions or modules, and they can reuse it over and over again. I can't remember the name of the most recent example I've seen, but it was like Pipedream Data Store or something like that. And that was someone's way of working around this problem in the meantime.
Okay. I'll have a dig.
Yeah, I would just like namespace it with your name, and then you can just reuse this module as you see fit, because it'll work. We can pull it down using the regular import system.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Of course. All right. Well, that concludes the first really short demo. We're going to have more of these, and they're going to cover different topics, but this is our very first one, just learning about the basics, and we'll have the same format. We'll just do a quick demo of new features and then Q&A at the end. But thanks for your time. Thanks for joining. We'll announce the next one, and hopefully you guys can join it. But thanks again.
Cheers. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.